In my last video, I made some predictions on where I think the seeding is going to end up in the Eastern Conference of the NBA this year. In this video, I'm going to do the same, but for the Western Conference. Let's get into this. Seed number 1, Denver Nuggets. Now this may be a surprise to some. While I don't necessarily see them going too far into the playoffs if injuries don't hobble them, I see the Nuggets trying to make a statement right from the get-go this season in the regular season. With Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. back from injury, they're far and away second and third best players. I think they'll hit the ground running during the first half of the year. Jokic by himself makes his team relevant, but Jamal Murray is a borderline all-star, and I think many have forgotten how good he really is. And MPJ is a potential all-star level talent who just needs to keep away from injury. My concern with the Nuggets is more postseason related. I need to see sustained excellence before I can give them any chance at going far in the playoffs. But I think for the regular season, I see them as a number 1 seed. Seed number 2, Phoenix Suns. No doubt there has been turbulence in the offseason. That being said, it's entirely possible that how that turbulence affects the play on court during the regular season could be negligible. The team still has the same pieces that made them a great regular season team for a couple of years in a row. Chris Paul is 1 year older, so perhaps he'll slow down a bit, but he's still going to be controlling games until the day he retires. Devin Booker is only 1 more year into the prime of his prime and likely to be amazing. Ayton may not be entirely satisfied with how everything has been going down, but he's still one of the top centers in the league. Mikal Bridges is still a defensive player of the year type of player and one of the most underrated players around. They're still an excellent team all around. My concern with the Suns is all about the postseason. During the regular season, their locker room issues don't have to affect things as much. But when the grind and intensity of the playoffs come in, the psychological elements of the game become more core to things. Can they lock in and get over the challenges that come from the playoffs? I don't have a lot of faith in them for that. Seed number 3, Golden State Warriors, the reigning NBA champions. Many may be surprised I don't have them higher up on the seeding list here, but there are a few reasons I have them down here at around the 3rd seed. I actually was very close to putting them on the 4th seed originally. I should first mention my reasoning has nothing to do with the whole Draymond punching Poole in the face thing. As awful as that really was, I actually think it isn't going to affect play on the court going forward. I don't see Poole as the type to let a squabble negatively affect his play on the court, and if Draymond remains on the team, I think he'll continue contributing in just the same way he always has. The main reason I have the Warriors down around 3rd is actually because I hope they spend a bit more time this year nurturing the next generation. I don't think they should do this to such a degree that it hurts the chemistry of the core championship contending team, but Curry, Clay, and Draymond are only getting older, and the Warriors will eventually be in the hands of Poole, Kuminga, Wiseman, and Moody, and I hope these players get their chances to shine this year. If they do, I don't necessarily think it means the Warriors will win all their games, but building up that confidence in those young players is an important part of the Warriors' future. That being said, once the second half of the season comes around, I don't think the Warriors will be experimenting anymore. They'll lock themselves into that grind and settle into those patterns that'll help them to be championship contenders in the playoffs. Seed number 4, LA Clippers. When Paul George and Kawhi Leonard were first brought together as teammates, the NBA world basically assumed this team was going to be unstoppable. But after a seemingly endless string of injuries, this team has instead been hobbling along disappointingly for quite some time now. But if Kawhi is back, this team is fully in contention. NBA fans have this tendency to forget how good some players are when they've been out for a while, especially if ESPN doesn't really talk about that player all that often anyway. Kawhi Leonard is one of the very best players in the NBA on both ends of the court. If injury doesn't get in the way yet again, I actually have Kawhi as one of my top 5 most likely MVP candidates this season. He is that good. If he only ends up playing half of the games, or if they rest him too often just to make sure he doesn't get injured, then that won't happen. But if he was actually to play, I think he's one of the top 5 best players in the NBA. Now, the Clippers aren't perfect. Their point guard situation is still a bit precarious. I don't have a lot of faith in John Wall at this point in his career, and even if he did return to some of his former glory, I don't necessarily like the fit next to Kawhi and PG so much. Reggie Jackson is solid, but solid is really no more than just solid. But despite this, I still have the Clippers ripe for title contention this year, as long as injuries don't hobble them yet again. Seed number 5, Memphis Grizzlies. With Jaren Jackson Jr. facing missing the first third or so of the season, I've heard from a number of people that it means the Grizzlies won't be nearly as good this year. However, I think a lot of teams overlook how good this roster actually is. Ja Morant is of course a budding perennial MVP candidate type of player, and as we observed last year, even when he's out, this team has learned how to make the best use of its various pieces. Desmond Bane kinda already broke out last year, but I expect an even further breakout this year. I think the Grizzlies will fall down a little bit in the standings compared to last year, but once Triple J returns from injury, I think that's all the spark they will need to make a fight for first round playoff home court advantage. I also see them as being a real fighter in the playoffs this year. They have the team chemistry and the grit needed to go far, and with another year of winning culture mentality under their belt, I think they're ready to make for a real beast in the playoffs. Seed number 6, Dallas Mavericks. The Mavericks just making it without being in the play-in tournament in my prediction here has everything to do with Luka Doncic. Plus, I actually quite like the addition of Christian Wood, and I think that's going to be a better combination than a lot of people seem to think. The loss of Jalen Brunson certainly isn't a great thing for the Mavs, but the combination of Spencer Dinwiddie and Tim Hardaway Jr., who was out half of last year, is really quite good too and eases the loss of Brunson to quite a degree. I expect Doncic to have an absolutely monster season, dwarfing even last year's monster-like season. Luka already has a very high usage rate, but without Brunson on the floor, I expect the Mavs offense to basically be a constant Luka show. Defenses will know exactly what to expect, and yet they'll still have the hardest time stopping it. Unfortunately, the Mavericks' defense still leaves something to be desired, and Luka's overtime work on the offensive side will make it hard for him to also make ongoing strides on the defensive end of the floor, which is really unfortunate. Now, once the playoffs come around, with someone like Luka on the team, you can never fully count them out. That being said, the Western Conference is really good this year, and it'll be a tough climb for them to go too far into the postseason, I think. Seed number 7, New Orleans Pelicans. If Zion can stay healthy all year, this will be one of my favorite teams to watch. It seems like a lot of people are really high on the Pelicans this year, but I still have a lot of question marks in my mind about them. McCollum, Ingram, and Zion are all excellent players, but I do question the fit. They're all prolific scorers, but I don't exactly know how the high usage need of all three of them will work in combination. Plus, the Zion and Valanciunas combination down low feels kinda clunky. Two guys who don't shoot outside, clogging up the lane, just seems like a recipe we've seen fail too many times in recent years. I do like their depth. Herbert Jones is awesome, Jackson Hayes is one of the better backup centers around, Devontae Graham has been somewhat underwhelming since he joined the Pelicans, but he's still pretty good, Kyra Lewis could be something, but my main concern is just how all the pieces will actually fit together in combination. Plus, of course, the constant injury possibility that's always on the back of your mind with Zion, but it's going to be really fun to see what happens to this team this year. Seed number 8. Minnesota Timberwolves. Considering the massive haul the T-Wolves gave up to get Gobert, I think they'll be much higher up this list than I have them here. A lot of basketball analysts seem to be saying the same thing. I'm not so confident about that though. Gobert does bring in some much needed defense. I mean, he's basically a defense all on his own, and that will help to cover up some of KAT's weaknesses on that end of the floor. I do worry a bit though on what it'll mean on the offensive side of things. KAT is one of the best 3-level scorers in the league, but with Rudy down low, KAT will have to be more of a 2-level scorer instead, taking away one of his dominant spaces. Anthony Edwards, also someone I think is destined to eventually become one of the best scorers in the NBA year after year, will have some of his lanes clogged by the presence of Gobert. I do understand why so many analysts are high on the T-Wolves this year, thinking it may be their breakout season. I just don't quite see it the same. Seed number 9, Los Angeles Lakers. I don't see a whole lot that makes me think there's going to be too much different going on in Lakerland this year compared to last year. LeBron is still one of the best in the league despite his continually graying hair, and he has the capability to give a team a shot at doing something just by his presence alone. However, the pieces around LeBron didn't get any better. If they had figured out a recipe last year to make things work within the clunky lineup they have, maybe they would have some hope on the horizon, but it seems like they just really haven't figured anything out. Anthony Davis hasn't impressed much, especially considering it was only like a season and a half ago that analysts were listing him as one of the top 5 players in the NBA. It's hard to see anything close to that at the moment. Westbrook is still Westbrook and will always be Westbrook. He could probably still drag a terrible team to play in contention all on his own, but his fit on this roster has never made sense. Even from the moment the original trade went down, I could not understand what the Lakers were thinking. Being in the 9th spot does mean that the Lakers will make the play-in tournament, and if they can get there, I think it gives them a good good shot at making the playoffs. The T-Wolves and the Pelicans are both unproven and have a lot of chemistry to figure out this year. In a one-game winner-takes-all situation, it's hard not to think LeBron might be able to push through. Seed number 10. Portland Trailblazers. The Blazers are my team. I should just say that first. If I didn't care about trying to be objective, I would have put them much higher. But objectively, I think a play-in tournament berth is about the ceiling of what they can expect this year. I do like the addition of Jeremy Grant, but I don't think he's a massive difference maker. He's above average on defense, but I really don't think he's much more than just above average. Anthony Simons is getting a lot of hype, but to be honest, I think he's basically just a not quite as good version of CJ McCollum. Lillard is amazing, plus it seems like his health is better this year than it's been in a long time. I fully expect him to have an awe-inspiring season. I expect to see some Dame time scenarios. It's just going to be amazing to witness, but I just don't think there's enough around him for that to end up resulting in anything more than just a play-in berth. But just like I said with the Lakers and LeBron, if the Blazers do make the play-in tournament, they've got a shot at the playoffs just because of Lillard's ability to take over a game when needed. I don't necessarily expect a playoff berth this year, but if it does happen, it'll be squarely because of a couple of transcendent Dame time games in a play-in. Seed number 11, Sacramento Kings. For the sake of Sacramento fans, I hope the Kings can make the playoffs this year. They do have a slight shot at that, but I'd say it really is a slight shot. I still have trouble understanding why they got rid of Halliburton last year, and I don't think Sabonis really moves the needle much for them. Plus, Sacramento has just gotten so used to losing, it'll be hard to build the winning kind of mentality necessary to push themselves into that playoff contention kind of mindset, especially in a very heavy and a very talented Western Conference. They've got De'Aaron Fox, who is too inconsistent to really be a #1 option for a good team, plus he's not very good at defense. Sabonis has a lot of limitations in his offensive game, plus he's not very good on defense. I like Davion Mitchell, but his 6-foot frame next to Fox's 6'3" frame is just too small in combination to stop a lot of teams. And then the rest of the team is mostly just like solid role players. To be completely honest, I probably would have even put Sacramento further down this list, but I don't think they're likely to be truly tanking to get a higher draft pick like the rest of the teams on this list might. I don't think they would want to encourage a losing culture when they have been trying so hard to break that mindset for so long. Seed number 12, Oklahoma City Thunder. The future of the Thunder team is fascinating. Even the present Thunder team is intriguing, but at a certain point the team feels like it's only looking towards its future without ever looking towards its present, but I feel like they may just do that for one more year here. If the next draft class didn't have for itself a couple of extremely sought prospects right at the top of the list, I think the Thunder would be ready to make a push for the play-in. However, with the injury of Chet Holmgren and the possibility of Wembanyama or Scoot Henderson awaiting those who fail the best, I wouldn't be surprised if the Thunder have for themselves another somewhat tanky season. I just hope that the Thunder actually get themselves into the realized potential side of the equation at some point while Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is actually on their team. He's such a good player to be on a team that is in a perpetual we're almost there mode. It'll be fun to see what Giddey brings to the table in his second season in the NBA. For a fantasy basketball team, I think he'd be an excellent pickup this year. But otherwise, yeah, I don't expect anything higher than a 12th seed this season for the Thunder. Seed number 13, Houston Rockets. The main reason I have the Rockets above the last two teams on this list is I think they're less committed to a full tank season, while the last two teams are in full-scale, no-holds-barred tank mode. They tanked to get Jalen Green and then Jabari Smith, and their pickup of Alperen Sengun also gives them a third solid piece to build around. What they need now is to start building a culture of winning, which is why I think they're less committed to a tank than the last two teams on this list. They're at a point where they need to be unlocking the latent potentialities of Green, Smith, and Sengun rather than tanking just to risk the possibility of maybe possibly getting another really good piece to add to the mix. They've got some good building blocks already, they just have to figure out how to use them. Jalen Green had a great second half of the season last year, and I fully expect to see a massive leap from him this year. I see a kind of Anthony Edwards trajectory in him. Seed number 14, San Antonio Spurs. It's tough to decide between the Spurs and the Jazz for who will achieve that coveted last place position and have the better chance at getting the first pick in the draft. Ultimately though, I think the Jazz are just more fully committed to truly tanking. The Spurs still have several young guys worth developing who could be really solid pieces into the future. Keldon Johnson, Joshua Primo, and Devin Vassell, which means they still have to balance some culture building and young player development into their tanking season. I think that means they'll end up eking out a couple more wins this year than the Jazz. Seed number 15, Utah Jazz. It's quite hard to imagine a more obvious tank trajectory than what the Jazz did during the offseason. From a contender to a team that'll probably win 20 to 25 games this year, if the Jazz do pull off getting Wembanyama in the draft next year and climb themselves back in contention immediately, we could be witnessing a masterclass in quick tank to quick rise. At least that's probably what they're thinking. Whether or not that'll actually work out for them, we'll have to wait and see. The worst possible scenario for them at this point would be if Sexton, Conley, and Clarkson managed to eke out more wins than currently expected. If that did happen, I'd actually expect they'd be quick to trade away whoever of those three was doing the best. They will solidly be a bad team this year though, and none too fun to watch at that. At least with the Rockets and the Thunder, their paths to losses should be full of exciting moments and glimpses of what a bright future might look like. The Jazz, nothing even close to that. And with that, that's the end of this video. I also made an Eastern Conference one, so make sure you check that one out. Peace.